In this video, we're going to look at how you identify the current period within your data models. Now, that current period could be current day, week, month, quarter, or year, but the idea is you want to identify the current period so that you can do things like creating rolling time periods, having your dashboard always default to the most recent period, whatnot. So there are 4 examples that I'm going to run through. Chances are there are more options in this, but these 4 will give you a good idea of the ways in which you can identify the current period in your model. So you'll see the 4 listed here. The first one we're going to look at is just identifying the last period in the data set as the current period. Then we're going to look at last period with data, the system date, and having a flag in your data model. Now, each of these are useful for various scenarios, and I will explain the scenarios as we identify them. So to start off with, let's go ahead and look at a data model. In this data model, what you'll see is I'm looking at data by month, and I'm going to create the current period for the current month. You'll see this data set goes all the way through December 2019, and the data is through that time period as well. So this particular model is just showcasing how I've got 3 years of data. But what I want to do is I want to create a list that represents the latest period within my data set. So what I'm going to do is, and I'll actually just build it from here, we're just going to go into the formula list builder. And in this formula list, it's going to be fairly simple or straightforward. We're going to look at the month object, and we're going to start with the full complete list of months. And then we're just going to add a simple filter called last and say that we want the last one. So once January data is available, the last one will return January 2020 as the current period. And so when I go ahead and run this, you'll see December 2019, that is the last time period I have. Now, this particular example is ideal in those cases where you are building what's known as a live model, meaning that the model is going straight against your relational database, or you're building an in-memory model or such that you've set up time intelligence in your model to be based on some date field within the data. Why this is useful is those sorts of scenarios of a live model or using time intelligence off of a date field in your table. That means the only data that I'm going to have in my model is historical data. So there's no future dates, it's all historical dates. So the last one in the list should be the latest one. So let's go ahead and save this. And we'll just call this current month. And I'm going to build 4 of these. So we'll just call this current month number 1. We'll save it. And now if we come back over here to this report, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear out this look, and you'll see we've got this new model. I'm going to uncheck everything and only check the current month option. All right, I can now use that current month as a filter within any report so that it will always be the latest, so that as the new data gets added, that value will shift. So that's the most basic, easiest way to identify the current month, is to just start with the list of months and then just ask for the last one. Okay, so that works well in a number of scenarios, but I've seen lots of data models where that's not going to work. In fact, what you'll see is I've got this other data model that instead of using the time intelligence from a date field in the table, I actually have what's called a date table, meaning I've got a pre-built table that has all of my date objects, and that pre-built table tends to actually populate data into the future. And so you'll see in this example, we actually have dates all the way out to December of 2020. So if I were to build that same logic, it would not really work. And in fact, we're going to see that. So we're going to basically build that same concept here, where we want all the months. And then if we were to just add the last one, if I were to preview that, you're going to see the last one actually returns December 2020. Okay, that's not going to work because I don't have any data for December 2020. And in fact, if I were to, in this example here, add something like sales, you'll see it automatically filters to only those months that have data. And that's essentially what I want to do in my logic, is I want it to look at the data and let the data dictate what the last one is. So the way that we do that over here is I'm going to remove this last one, and I'm going to add a filter before that called non-empty. The purpose of the non-empty filter is for you to find values that meet a certain criteria. In this case, the criteria that we're going to use is we just want to show only the months that have data. So I'm just going to choose sales. If I were to preview this, you'll see it's going to give me 2017 through December of 2019 because I don't have any 2020 data yet. So that limits the list. And then once that list is limited, I can then add my last option, and it's going to return that same value. So in this case, the trick is the labels for my dates are pre-populated into the future, but I only have data up through yesterday as an example. And so in order to identify current month in those sorts of models, I need to add this non-empty option as a way to filter out only those months where I have data. Okay, so now if I come back over here, and once again, let's remove the labels or the filters and go back to my elements. Let's just grab this current month 2 and run it. You'll see it's just going to return whatever that latest time period is. And as we add more data, it'll automatically shift as we would expect it to. All right, so that's the first two options, the last period and the last period with data.